Last week we began our Advent series, Christmas in First Person. This series is 4 weeks of monologue that allow us to meet different persons in the Christmas story. Through these personal tales, we are allowed into the thoughts, fears, and emotions of those who were so important in the beginning of the life of Jesus. The story hasn't changed, but it is our prayer that through a more personal view of what these persons went through as they sought to serve God, that we might learn how we can draw closer to God and serve Him throughout our lives. Last week, as you remember, we met Mary, the mother of Jesus. She was a young girl who was already going through a lot of changes in her life. And then she found that she had been chosen by God to bear His Son. She was brave in the midst of the fear as she agreed to do as God had asked. There was one person in the world at that time who could come closest to understanding what she was doing, and that was her cousin, Elizabeth. So upon learning that God had blessed Elizabeth and her husband with a child as well, Mary, she went to visit her. It is Elizabeth that we meet today. She is Mary's cousin, but closer to the age, most likely, of Mary's mother, or even older. Elizabeth was married to a priest who served in the temple. It was thought at the time that the continuing worship that took place in the temple ensured that God's presence in the temple and God's blessings upon the land for protection and good conditions for farming. It was the priest's duty to do their priestly service in order to maintain this abundance and security. The priests were educated in religion, Jewish law, literature, and tradition. It is said that Zechariah was blameless in observing the commandments. In other words, he was a religious man. Those priests of the tribe of Levi cared for the temple, and they took turns doing different jobs. At the time when he discovered that in their older years, he and Elizabeth were to have a son, he was performing the incense offering. Elizabeth and Zechariah lived in Hebron in the hill country of Judah. We don't have a lot of information about Elizabeth, but she would have lived in a fairly typical life for Judah in the first century. She would have kept her home, she would have carried water, perhaps weaved clothes, and fixed meals. They ate a bit differently than we do as well. They would generally eat just 2 meals a day, each day with bread being the main food. Depending upon what they could afford, the bread could be made of barley or of wheat. Breakfast sometimes might have been just flat bread, olives, and cheese. This would have been packed and taken with the men to do whatever job they were doing. It would have been eaten somewhere around mid-morning. Now, dinner was the most substantial meal, consisting of lentil stew, bread, fruit, eggs, and cheese. Fish could also be sometimes something that they would eat rather as a common staple. Elizabeth must have been overwhelmed when she discovered that she and Zechariah would finally be parents. But we can also imagine that she was thrilled that something she longed for would finally happen. And she knew that God was with her. Unfortunately, we don't hear much about Elizabeth in the text. We're only told the following. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she remained in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me when He looked favorably upon me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Well, hello. I didn't realize so many folks would be here. You know, I know a lot of people have been curious about what's been going on. These last few months have been a little strange, but yet somehow very interesting. Really not used to speaking in front of a large crowd. That'd be something more my husband would do, but you know, he's been mute for 9 months, so he's only just getting used to talking again. Well, I'm sorry, I guess I should introduce myself, and then I'm going to tell you this amazing story. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm married to Zechariah. Zechariah and I both come from the tribe of Levi, and great prophet for our people. Well, this was both strange and exciting. It was strange because, well, Zechariah knows that I'm well past childbearing years, so he wasn't quite sure about that. But it was exciting because we haven't had a true prophet in 500 years. Still, as amazed as Zechariah was at being visited by an angel, he wasn't so sure about my having a child. And when the angel realized that Zechariah didn't believe him, Gabriel struck him mute until our son was born. Yes, we had a boy. You know, when Zechariah came out of the temple, no one knew what had happened. They only noticed that he couldn't speak any longer. It wasn't long before people started to realize that I was pregnant. There was a lot of curious folks wondering how that could be. The angel also told Zechariah that our child was a special child. He was to be a prophet to be. He was to be set aside for God's work. And then he told us that we were to raise him in a certain way. We were to feed him a certain diet and dress him in a certain way and set him aside for God's work. You know, this didn't bother us, though. We didn't mind doing anything that God wanted us to do because we were so excited that he had finally answered our prayers and that we would have a child. And that child was the one that the prophet Isaiah had spoken of. He was going to be the one that would go before the Messiah and announce the coming of the Messiah. And you know what? The Messiah is coming. The Messiah is to be born in just a few months. And I know you're probably wondering, well, how would I know that? Well, the Messiah has been conceived by a young virgin. The Holy Spirit came over her. And that young virgin is my cousin. Her name is Mary, and she told me that she too was visited by Gabriel. And that Gabriel told her that she had found favor with God. And that she would now bear God's son. She said she was very overwhelmed by all of this, but she's such a faithful person that she said she would do whatever it was that God wanted her to do. And you know, she's going to make a wonderful mother for Jesus. Jesus. That is the name that the angel said they were to call the child. When the angel spoke with Mary, he also told her about my pregnancy. And this is the only way she could have known because we hadn't told anyone and we didn't see much family. And as soon as she found out that I was pregnant, she came to visit me and stay with me for 3 months. It was so wonderful that we were able to be together. We were able to talk with one another and support one another. She was so much company to me. I mean, Zechariah wasn't any company at all. We didn't talk. But she and I could understand one another. I mean, who else could we have spoken with? We didn't know anyone who had ever been in the same circumstances that we were in. So we shared together, and I supported her as best I could and tried to build her up and encourage her because she was so young. And then she was so helpful to me. You know, there's a lot of things you can't do when you're pregnant. And then she left not long after or before I was to have the baby. back home because she too was pregnant, and she needed to be back where Joseph was. Joseph is the young man to whom she's engaged. And she and Joseph both come from the tribe of Judah. And that means the child will come from the tribe of Judah, just as it was prophesied. The Messiah is coming. God has not forgotten us. He has not forgotten his promises. And our son, our perfect little boy, is going to be the one that goes before him and announces his coming, just as Isaiah stated. A voice crying in the wilderness, make way for the Lord. And then Mary's child, Jesus, will be the one that Isaiah also spoke of. The one that will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. I'm so excited. Aren't you excited that the Messiah is coming? You know, I am so honored and so blessed that God has called upon me. But he is also calling each of you. You know, it's time for all of us to prepare for the coming of the Messiah. And as we do this, we need to decide how it is we are going to answer God's call. I've thought about this. I've answered that call. And now I think you need to think about it too. Shalom.
As I stated earlier, Elizabeth was probably excited, but she may not have known or felt lucky at the time. Just think about her age. Think about her husband not being able to speak with her for 9 months. Think about knowing she had to raise her child in a certain way so that he could be set apart for that special purpose. This child's coming at this time in their lives had changed their lives. God wanted this child to be Israel's new prophet. There was a lot of pressure and stress that came with this bundle of joy, yet Elizabeth was willing to see what could be and to give of herself to be a part of it. She was able to give of herself. This is not the easiest thing to do. If you give of yourself, then what you want does not always come first. If you are willing to give of yourself, then you are willing to put the needs of others before your own needs and your own wants. It is not always convenient to give to yourself or give of yourself, but this is exactly what Jesus came into this world to do. Elizabeth is a model for all of us, for how we should be willing to give of ourselves. We don't have to have a child that is a prophet, but we can serve our neighbor. We can feed the hungry. We can work for fair price housing. We can seek justice, and we can give a voice to the voiceless. The question is, are you willing to give of yourself in your service to God? Can we each offer ourselves up to God's mysterious will and his ways? When we can do that, that will be good news.